All right, my financially intentional people. I am back with Jordan Grumet, and you guys know him because he has been on the podcast a couple of times, and I've been on his podcast a couple of times. And if you haven't listened to those episodes, I'll go ahead and link them in the show notes. But the reason why we're talking today is because Jordan has came out with his second book, or it's coming out, the Purpose Code. And I want to dive into that book because I feel like it'll give us some instructions on life that we've been missing out on, and just excited to talk to Jordan in general. So welcome, Jordan, to the Financially Intentional Podcast again.
I am so happy to be back. We always have the best conversations, Naseem. So I'm
Aw,
always excited to be around you.
I like to think so, but I'm a little biased. So Jordan, let's talk about the Purpose Code, why you wrote it, and like how it's different from your other works. Like you have works. So let's just dive straight in.
Most of the Purpose Code came actually when I was marketing my first book, Taking Stock. And if you've read the book or if you've heard of it, the idea behind Taking Stock was what I learned from my dying patients, because I'm a hospice doctor, is that we really have to put purpose, identity, and connections before our finances and then build a financial framework around them. And so I was marketing this idea as I was giving talks and talking to people about my book, Taking Stock. And I kept getting the same response, not by everyone, but occasionally at almost every time I went and gave a talk about the book, someone would corner me and they'd be a little bit angry, a little bit pissed off. And they'd say, look, it's great that you're telling me to find my purpose, and that's wonderful, but I've been searching for purpose for the last few years and I can't seem to find it. And I'm getting a little frustrated. And in fact, I don't think there is a purpose. And maybe you're actually harming people by telling them to find their purpose. And this was something I encountered multiple times. And it really made me think. I said, let's look into this. Like, why do I feel like purpose is so important, but it's also causing people frustration? And I found a bunch of data. First and foremost, the data shows that clearly having a sense of purpose in life is associated with health, longevity, and happiness. It is clear. There are tons and tons and tons of studies. On the other hand, I also found other studies that showed that up to 91% of people get anxiety around this idea of purpose. They call it purpose anxiety. People get frustrated or even depressed because they're searching for purpose and can't seem to find it. And so that was a big paradox in my mind. And so I started thinking, how do we explain this paradox? And what I came to through my experiences, through book writing, through having a podcast, is that we get this concept of purpose wrong. It's probably not just one thing. It's actually probably two things. And part of that is associated with the health, longevity, and happiness. But the way often we try to do purpose in our lives actually is more associated with anxiety. And so that's where the book came from, was this hope to really clarify why purpose can both be the most wonderful thing, but also cause us anxiety.
Wow, that's strong. So I am like of this camp. Okay, purpose is great. And finding your purpose, I felt like I found my purpose a couple of times in life already. But like chasing purpose is one of those controversial things, especially when it comes to career, because a lot of us associate purpose around our careers. And especially in the fire community, it's like screw purpose, grind for 10 years, and then you can go chase your purpose. What have you found in researching your book that's like addresses that dichotomy? Should we be chasing purpose, or should we do the things we need to do financially? Because at the end of the day, we're both in the personal finance space to get to the point where we are privileged enough to chase purpose.
The answer is yes and yes. We should really be doing both. And that's the problem I tend to have. Is I know a lot of people who did just that. They grinded it out. They got to financial independence. And once they got there, they left their jobs, which they loathed. But the problem was they didn't have anything to replace that time with something that they loved. So my goal for everyone is get rid of as much as you loathe in your life and replace it with as much as you love in your life. So they were handling one side of the equation, but they weren't doing a very good job of the other side. Yes, you can grind it out and put purpose aside and then pursue purpose later. I think that's fine as long as you're intentional about it. This is called financially intentional. So if you're being financially intentional about it and you realize that purpose is important and you're going to put it off to the side, that's fine. But one thing about dealing with the dying I found is that you never know when your time is up. And it's really tragic. My father died when he was 40 years old. It's really
Mm.
tragic if you spend all your time grinding it out and you never make it there. So the
Yeah.
real question is, can we start building purpose into our life now, even while we're building that financial framework? So no, you don't have to love your job. You don't have to be passionate about your job. But I think it's important to build a sense of purpose around your life, even while you're doing that job. Can you toggle a little bit at work to do some things that are more purposeful? If you can at work, can you toggle at home and make sure that those hours spent when you're not working are well spent building up the kind of life you want to live, so that when you do leave that job, you have something to step into that fills you up? And so I don't think it needs to be either or. And it's not all black and white. It's not like you
Yeah.
can just throw everything away and not make money. No, if you're good at something and you can do it and it's your skill and you've been trained and that's what you do to make money, I'm not saying throw that all away. I'm just saying let's bring the purpose conversation in and integrate it into your life, regardless of what you do for a living.
I love that. And you're like an example for me of what it looks like to find purpose in what you're doing. So I feel like you were able to negotiate in your job to get rid of the things that you felt were life sucking and draining and only focus on the things that you felt like served your purpose in that role. And it made it so that you weren't chasing this FI number just to escape. You were now in a job that was fulfilling, that worked around your lifestyle. And I think that's a perfect example of the purpose code. It doesn't have to be you're in this toxic job and then you leave. And I tell people this all the time because people are always, especially in nursing, they're like, oh, there's so much burnout. There's so much bedside fatigue. Like, I have to leave. I have to quit. I have to start this thing. And I'm just like, not necessarily. I have found a great balance in working as a bedside nurse and I love it. And it's something that I don't think I have to retire from. However, I do opt out of a lot of the BS that causes people those things. But it's because I am in a place financially where I can do. So you have to set yourself up for that. And I think a lot of people are in jobs that they like, but they don't like certain parts of it. So if they address the things that they like and really leaned into those things, that they would be fulfilled and they would have purpose and they wouldn't have such an urgency to want to quit and try to find something else.
Yeah, it's all about margin. What I've
Yeah.
found is that when we build a little margin into our life, building a sense of purpose is much easier. But the problem is everyone thinks that money is the only margin. And so I have to grind it out because I need more money. And once I have enough money, I can build margin. That is true. And it's a fantastic form of margin, but there are others too. There's frugality is an amazing version of margin. Geo arbitrage is an amazing version of margin. Our communities, like your family, is great margin.
Yes.
So if I'm doing a job I hate, could I move back in with my parents, which means my monthly expenses are much low and I can do a little bit less of that job I hate, or maybe transition to a job that I like a little more, but that pays less. And so if we think about the tools we have, money is a great tool, but we have our communities, our skills, our energy, our youth. Like at 51 years old with 2 kids, 1 in college and a mortgage, I have a little bit less freedom than I did when I was 20.
Right.
That's a tool. I also have a lot more money now, which is also a tool. So you're trading off.
Yes.
But a lot of the time people feel like, I don't have a lot of money, so I have no tools at my disposal. I would say we have these other tools and we can start building margin with those tools. And when you have margin, you can then build purpose.
I love that. I love that. But how do people find that margin, especially if they feel like they're in a place where they don't have that, or they just never heard of this concept because this is all foreign to them, because most people have been taught to just grind it out and get into a good job and just retire miserably in your 60s or 70s. So how do people like define that margin within their lives?
I think you have to really almost take an inventory, right? My first book was called Taking Stock. In a lot of ways, we do need to take stock, but not only of our money, right? So if you were 22, and I use this example all the time, if you were 22, just got out of college, couldn't find the job you wanted, ended up doing a job you don't like, but it pays the bills. So you're like, I need this job. It's paying my bills. I need to eat. this is a great time to start looking at what are those other tools I have. And again, you have your age, right? You have your energy. I might have to work that 8 to 6 like a madman, but you know what? I got Saturday and Sunday off, and I'm 22 years old. I probably have more energy than this 50-year-old guy who's talking to me on this podcast. I probably can start a side hustle on the weekend, or at least find something I'm passionate about that's purposeful to me. And if it creates some money, great. And if it doesn't, at least I've added purpose into my life. I might have parents in the neighborhood. I might, at 22, you're not married. You could pick up and move to a different state that costs less to live in. You could move to a different country.
Yeah.
And what are your passions and skills? What are you skilled at? Could you use that? Maybe you're a great teacher. Maybe at 22, you don't like your job. You go get a job teaching English in a foreign country where the cost of living is exceedingly less, but you're doing it for an American company, which pays you a little bit higher. And all of a sudden, geo arbitrage is working for you. The point is, for every person, it's going to be different because we all have a different tool set. But I'm just trying to get people not to ignore them. Really take stock, take an inventory of what you have available to you, and then use that to not only live a life that feels purposeful, but then to build your financial future, because they really go hand in hand. And I think that's what, I don't think it has to be an either or situation.
I love that. I love that. And backing up to when you were talking about that purpose anxiety, I'm wondering if that is associated with thinking that you have to have this like one purpose, because I know that over the years of my life, my purpose has changed. It's changed in the last year. Like as things evolve, I'm on my second career and I've been in this career for 15 years. So I just wonder, in your research, what have you found is like driving that anxiety?
So we are born with this idea of what purpose is. And I've actually broken purpose down into two different types, what I call big P purpose and little P purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Big P purpose, I really think, is focused more on things that causes anxiety. And little P purpose actually is what I think leads to health, longevity, and happiness. So what's the difference? Big P purpose tends to be really, really goal oriented. It tends to be big and audacious, and it's all or nothing. A lot of times is, I want to be a billionaire. I want to be president. I want to cure cancer. I want to save as many lives as possible. Like these really big, audacious goals. The problem is they're very scarcity mindset oriented. There are only going to be a few presidents during any generation. There are only going to be a few astronauts. Only few people are going to win the Nobel Prize. We only have a handful of billionaires in every state. You are most likely to fail if that's your version of big P purpose, because you don't have agency. In order to do these things, you got to be the right person at the right time with the right genetics, saying the right things, and you need a hell of a lot of luck. And the truth of the matter is, some of us don't have the genetics, some of us don't have the luck. Some of us are just not saying the right thing at the right time. And if we were born 10 years later, maybe we would have been more successful. So when you go after this version of purpose where you don't have agency, where it's all or nothing and it's very scarce, you're most likely to fail, which is going to bring anxiety. It's going to bring disappointment. It's going to feel bad. On the other hand, if we reimagine purpose, instead of it being goal oriented, we think about it much more as process oriented. What are the things I love doing? This is abundant because you could love doing a million things. It's not all or nothing. It's all or all. In fact, there's no way to fail. You just start doing things you like. And guess what? If you stop liking the process of doing it, regardless of the goal, then you go do something else. So purpose doesn't have to be lifelong. It doesn't have to change the world. You can have one purpose or many purposes. Your purpose could have a big goal and it could change the world. But my rule about little P purpose is you have to enjoy the process regardless of whether you reach the goal or not. So you might want to become a billionaire, and you may love building companies. And if you love building companies and the process of doing that lights you up, it's great to have a big goal. But your joy, your sense of purpose can't rely on that goal, because you might hit that goal or you might not. And so to me, that's the crux of the situation. We tend to think big, audacious goals are going to make us happy. I think they more often make us frustrated. And more importantly, we tend to think that big, audacious goals are going to give us legacy and impact. But what I argue in the book actually is that little P purpose, these smaller goals, more process oriented, actually probably change the world more.
Wow. I love that. I love that because I'm very much a little P. I chase little P's all the time, right? And not because I don't want the big P, but I just understand how over time things change, and I'm very much into enjoying the process. If I'm
Totally.
not enjoying the process, I feel like I'm too old. Like I put in the groundwork. I don't want to do that anymore. What I need to be doing now are only things that are fulfilling to me. And so, with my precious time that I have during the day, those few hours, and if it doesn't feel right, it's too expensive for me to do,
Mhm.
time wise, effort wise, not even, I don't care what it costs. It's too expensive for me. So I love the definition of big P, little p, and delineating that, and like fleshing that out for people, because I think most people think passion has to be that big P when it doesn't have to be. So I think that's incredible. But you have heard countless stories from people as a hospice doctor on their deathbed. As it pertains to purpose, what are the themes that you've heard over and over again?
Well, the idea is we want to live on, right? We want
Mhm.
our lives to have had meaning. We want to impact people. We want to make a difference. And here again, I think it really comes down to the difference between little p purpose and big P purpose. Everyone tells me I'm going for big P purpose because this is impact, right? I'm going to change the world. I'm going to cure cancer, etc. And I often tell them the story growing up of a man I knew named Roman. I was a little kid who had a learning disability, and then my dad died when I was 7. I was a geek. I had no friends. I didn't fit. And there was this antique store owner named Roman who one day decided that not only did he want to sell antiques, but he came across some baseball cards. He sold them for nothing. The teenager he sold them to was, aha, you have no idea what you just sold me. These are worth a lot more than you just sold this for. He was enthralled. He developed a sense of purpose around selling baseball cards. He decided to change his antique store, half antiques, half baseball cards. And he created this community for nerds and geeks like me, for people who had no confidence, who didn't have friends, who didn't have a social calendar. All of a sudden, I had a place to go.
Mm.
And the adult I became was forever changed by this mentorship, this guy who took all of us young kids under his wings and taught us about community and belonging and confidence. Roman died years ago. He ended up getting cancer. He had to close the shop. He eventually died from it. But 30 years later, I'm still talking about him, not because he wanted to change the world, not because he wanted to cure cancer, not because he wanted to make $1 billion, because he fell in love with this idea of selling baseball cards and built a life around it. He didn't find this. It wasn't that he found baseball cards and that's what was better, because it's hard to find purpose. What he did is he had an inkling of something that brought him joy, and then he built a life around it.
Mm.
And that changed people. His pursuing what was joyful for him, the thing he did not because he had a big goal in mind, but because he loved it, changed the world. Who I never talk about and who didn't change my life? Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle was one of the greatest baseball players ever. I used to
Mhm.
love to collect his baseball cards when I was a kid. 30 years later, Roman affected my life. Mickey Mantle didn't. And in fact,
Mm.
if I had decided that I wanted to be just like Mickey Mantle, that I wanted to be an all-star baseball player, most likely I would have failed if that was my big P
Mm.
purpose, because I didn't have the strength, stamina, genetics, chances, luck, ability, God knows what. And so for every million people who want to be like Mickey Mantle, 999,999 of them are going to fail and feel a sense of anxiety around what they thought was purposeful. I never think of him, but the guy who really impacted my life was Roman, this guy who did what he did because it felt like purpose in his life. And I guess what I'm trying to say with this book is I want all of you out there to have a chance to be like Roman. I
Mm.
want you to pursue your little p purpose and have it change the people around you and change lives. And I think if we can realize that by doing these smaller things that light us up, we attract other people to us, we become teacher and student, mentor, mentee, we create this great model for our kids and the people around us, and we change them, and it changes the world. And that's the goal.
I love that, because recently I lost my grandfather, who was like the biggest influence in my life forever. Like he's like my second dad, and like grappling with trying to resolve a lot of his stuff. A lot has come up, and We're trying to figure out what to do with the houses, with all of the things. And I was actually talking to my friend today, and he was talking about this expensive barbecue grill that he wanted to buy. And he was like, I can leave it to my son. And I was like, your son does not want that stuff. Okay. He is not going to want that old crusty barbecue grill when he gets older. But what he wants right now is the time that he can spend with you. I think that that's more important. There is obviously a place for making sure you set your kids up financially to be in a good place. But I think that is focused on more than making sure that you are having an impact in building, like you said, that personal legacy.
And I think in the book, I argue something which is very controversial. I actually say that people shouldn't be your purpose. And I'm thinking specifically
Mm.
of parents and kids.
Ah,
So a lot of people say, I know my purpose, it's my kids. And that's wonderful. And I
yeah.
think that's good. But we talk about financial modeling and the legacy we financially leave our kids. But we also need to leave them almost a purpose legacy too.
Mm.
When your kids get older, you want them to develop passions, excitement, things they do that light them up inside. The only way they're going to learn that is by watching you do the same. You don't want your kids to just live for their kids. You want them to live for those things that really light them up. But the way we teach that to our children is not spending every moment with our children. The way we teach that to our children is our children get to see us doing things that light us up. Nassima, you're a perfect example. Your kids are going to grow up seeing you loving nursing. They're going to grow up seeing you loving podcasting. They're going to grow up seeing you feel this real sense of intentionality around finance.
Mhm.
These things that make you smile and do an Instagram post where you're dancing around and all the wonderful things you do,
Uh-huh.
because that stuff lights you up. And that modeling is going to give them permission when they're adults to pursue their own sense of purpose, to do things for themselves, to really enjoy life. And they might even try on your sense of purpose and
Mhm.
say, does this fit me or not? And so that legacy, that generational growth, remember, instead of generational trauma or these
Mhm.
bad money scripts we give kids where we teach them all these negative things because of our trauma, what you can do then is pass on the generational growth of having them see you do something purposeful and them trying on those purposeful activities and see if it fits for them and then finding their own ones.
I love that. And I could only hope that my kids could take some lessons from me. But yes, I do live life really intentional about and the things that I do. But I would struggle with trying to figure out how to intentionally pass that on to them. I know that more is caught than taught, but taking me out of the example, like how do people structure that in their lives so that they can model that?
I
Mhm.
think it's just as easy as pursuing little p purpose in your own life, and the
Mm.
rest will follow. I
Yeah.
think when you do the things that light you up like a moth to a flame, people are attracted to you and you will bring people into your life and your kids will see this. And so
Yeah.
for me, for instance, it's very intentional for my kids to see me doing the stuff I love doing, like writing books and being on podcasts. And I want them to see the joy, the excitement, all of that, not because I want to teach them how to make money. It's because I want to model for them what living an intentional, happy, purposeful life looks like. And
Yeah.
I want them to see the abundance. We all get to abundance. And when we think abundance, we think money. I think purpose. I think there's so many things we could do on any given day that can light us up. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I love walking. So I make sure I walk for 30, 45 minutes a day. That lights me up. That makes it a good day. I love reading, not reading
Mhm.
to learn, but just reading for pleasure. But
Mhm.
then I also love book writing and public speaking and all these other things that are maybe a little more challenging and different, but it can all fit together. And as long as I enjoy the process of doing it, they're worthwhile activities. So I think kids will, just like you don't have to teach kids generational trauma, they get it by watching you. You don't have to teach kids generational growth. They get it by
Mhm.
seeing you do the things you do. I just think we have to model for them all this positive stuff as opposed to some of the negative stuff that we bring with us from generations before.
Yeah. I concur. I concur. But in writing this book, what was the biggest difference between this and taking stock?
Taking stock ultimately was about building your financial life. The
Mm,
purpose code is about building your emotional and internal life. And so
mhm.
it's a little bit different. I say it's the next step. So I think they're
Ah,
very connected.
mhm,
And I think what I was really trying to do with taking stock is establish what this tool of money means in ultimately living a good life. Now the purpose code is we now understand this tool and how to fit into our life, but what does living a good life truly look like? And it looks like
mhm.
a life of meaning and purpose. This book is talking about purpose. At some point I might write a book about meaning, because I think it's the other key part of it that I talk a little bit about in the purpose code, but I don't go into as deep depths.
What, you found the meaning of life?
I often say that meaning and purpose together make happiness. And so it's
Ah,
not the meaning of life, it's how we cognitively look at our past
mhm.
and cognitively interpret it as meaning. And then purpose is more present and future oriented. It's more about actions, whereas meaning is
Mm.
more about thoughts and about our
Ah.
past. And so it's integrating meaning, a good sense of meaning and understanding our past and dealing well with it, added to a good sense of our present and future and actions, I think are the two main ingredients to what happiness truly looks like.
So for somebody reading, taking stock, and then following that up with purpose code, like ultimately, what journey do you want them to go on?
What I want them to do is start looking at their time allotment in life. So, what I always tell people is you can't buy or sell time, you can't commoditize it. Time passes no matter what you do. And so, we're given these little time slots. I call them time slots, but it's a way of breaking up the time we have on this earth. You could call them days, months, years, you call them hours, whatever feels good to you. But we have a limited number of time slots, and the only thing we control is what activities go in those time slots. So the journey I want people to make is to start where they are today and help them get rid of as many things that fill those time slots that they loathe. That's the art of subtraction. I want them to bring in a new sense of purpose, the joy of addition. Let's add in these activities that we find purposeful and joyful. And when we're stuck and we can't add and subtract, let's substitute out things that don't work for things that work a little bit better. And so ultimately, it's a calculus. I'm just looking at how much time you have, and let's fill that time with as much good, purposeful activity you love as possible. And let's get rid of as much you don't like. And so that's the real journey with both of those books taken together. One is a lot more financial, one's a little bit more emotional in how we structure the activities we live in. But that's the idea behind both of them.
Like when I'm listening to all of this, it sounds incredible, right? But then looking at like my demographics and the people that I serve, a lot of people, I get a lot of resistance around like privilege, right? It
Mm-hmm.
sounds good, but I'm just struggling like day to day. I can't even get to the point where I can think about those kind of things. How do we talk to those people? How do we bring those people in? Because I feel like they can benefit too.
So there is a whole chapter about privilege that talks very in depth about this specific issue. And so what I like to tell people is this goes back to the tools we have in our tool belt. A lot of times when we talk about privilege, we're specifically talking about the tool of money. But again, a lot of people don't realize they have these other tools that have nothing to do with money. And that example of the 23-year-old who's working the 8 to 6 and is exhausted and they just have enough money to pay their way, they have all sorts of tools and opportunities that if they just identify, they can start using to build margin. So you might not have a lot of money, but you might have more time. And trust me, there have been studies actually. The US Department of Labor does the time, I forget what the US time survey every few years, and they actually found that your average American has about 5 hours of free time a day. And specifically, people in the lower socioeconomic brackets have slightly more time than people in the upper socioeconomic brackets. So time, for instance, is a tool that a lot of us have. A lot of people have the tool of youth. A lot of people have the tool of not having children or not having a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
Let's find ways for you to use those tools because you don't have a lot of the tool of money. Can you start a side hustle on the weekend, one that you're passionate about, one that you enjoy? 6 months later, after doing that side hustle for 3 hours a week, what happens? Either you start making some money and that gives you some margin to pull back at that 8 to 6 you don't like, or you don't make any money, but hey, you spent 3 hours a week doing something deeply purposeful for you. So you've already improved that calculus of those time slots. You've added in 3 hours of purposeful activity, although you haven't subtracted out anything, but that's still an improvement. And so even if you are in the most dire of circumstances, how can we slowly add in things that bring us joy, even if they're tiny, things that don't necessarily cost money? How can we slowly subtract out things that don't work? When all else fails, how can we substitute? Can we substitute one job for another? Can we substitute one boss with another boss within that job? Can we go from one position in our company to another position, even if it doesn't give us more pay, but we like it more? The point is, how do we use some of these other tools we have?
I love that. The aggregation of marginal gains. And I think that is synonymous with your little P, your little P
Yeah, for
purpose.
sure.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. And so I just want people to understand that these tools are accessible for everyone. And that's why I'm here, because sometimes it's easier to hear it from me than it is to hear it from you. And like I said, like you said, I think those little things, those little P activities are the things that are more impactful than these big audacious goals that people think that they have to achieve in life. And yeah, I just love that. And you gave great examples on how to pursue that. Let's talk about how people can get this book.
So the easiest way is to go wherever books are sold. It's going to be available January 7th. You can get it on Amazon. You should be able to get it at most of the major bookstores. If you have any questions, you can always go to jordangrumet.com. That's JORDANGRUMET.com. There you will find a link to both of my books, as well as the places where I create content on the web, including my podcast, Earn and Invest.
Yes. But your book is coming out January 7th. Is it going to be pre-sale? Can you pre-order it now?
Yes,
Okay.
basically it's already available on Amazon if people want to pre-order.
Okay, so let's go ahead and pre-order that while we get your copy of Taking Stock. If you haven't gotten that already, check out Jordan on Earn and Invest, the podcast that is phenomenal, and the other podcast that you're associated with as well. You have a podcast network, right?
So I'm associated with Stacking Benjamins. So
Yes.
between Stacking Benjamins and I, Joe Salcihi, the owner of Stacking Benjamins, also collaborates on Earn and Invest.
Love it. Love it. All right, Jordan, this has been such a powerful conversation. And I hope people are on their way to finding purpose just from starting here, but also can go check out those books, jordangrumet.com, Earn and Invest. Again, Jordan, I love talking to you. I can talk to you forever.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Thank you.